And we're going to get into the final question today. And this is actually a really good question from a person I actually know who sent this to me. And I can't wait to dive into it. And this question comes from Aaliyah Grace. And she writes, "Hey, Alex, so do you think you can reason with fanboys who think they're right all the time? I mean, sometimes it's hard for me to get them to see the very thing they like so much has flaws. How do you handle toxic fanboys?" Well, thank you for your question, Leah, and thank you so much for promoting the show as well. You're an amazing friend. I'm gonna put this into two categories. So there's a positive and a negative. I'll use myself as an example for the positive at least. I'm a huge fanboy of Static Shock. I love Virgil. I love the lore. I love his powers. I love the essence of Virgil Hawkins because I can relate to him a whole lot, right? Like, that's my guy. Like, there's nobody can tell me that he is a terrible character because I don't believe that. However, though, I can acknowledge that in compare to him as a comic book character, in comparison to others, he is not that great in comparison to others. Black Panther is obviously the better superhero. Spider-Man, Batman, these characters who have a lineage are better superheroes. That doesn't diminish him as a character, but at the same time, I understand that Static Shock and all of his greatness has flaws. Like, some of his villains are very silly. I don't understand why it takes you a whole 30 minutes for some of your villains to beat. If your powers are electricity and you have a problem fighting somebody who has powers who have water, I don't really understand how you can't just handle that within 2 to 3 minutes. That's just me, but I understand that there's a flaw when in terms of the writing of that particular character. So I love Static. I can't wait to see whatever they do with Static in the near future, if they choose to do anything with Static in the near future. Now, the negative side of that, I won't say who, because I've collaborated with this person before. There's a particular person that I know that loves this particular property a whole lot. And the moment anybody says anything negative about them, about this particular property, they will go off. Well, they won't go off per se, but they would definitely give you a commentary on why you were wrong for feeling how you feel about it. And I can tell you that, and I've made videos about this. Me and Jeremy have made videos about this. I'm just telling you right now that if I see a flaw in a particular property, doesn't mean that the property sucks. It just means that, hey, there's a flaw there that doesn't make it all that great. As a fan, I can acknowledge that. If I'm showing you evidence of this not being a great property as you claim it to be, I'm just pointing out that I'm not trying to shit on it. I just want you to come back to reality that, hey, it's cool, but it ain't in comparison to others, it really isn't all where we weigh it. Like, although I think Static is better than Batman, right? I think he's better than Batman. We all know Batman would whoop Virgil's ass. That is very true. But at the same time, when you look at toxic or negative fanboys, you have to understand that there's certain things that you can say, there's certain things that you cannot say. It kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, that there's a consequence for everything that you say. However, though, I will say that I don't hate the fact that if you love something that much and it's perfect to you, that's great, but at the same time, when you're dealing with toxic fanboys or just negativity about fanboys who really love something, I mean, all you really can do is just hear them out. If they don't really want to hear you out, then you just keep it pushing. But I'm sure my panelists have dealt with this before. Jeremy, what do you think about fanboys and their love for their thing that they like, and how do you deal with the negativity that comes with that?
When dealing with a toxic fanboy, you just look him in the eyes, and you let out a long sigh, and you say, "You're right. Zack Snyder is the greatest director in the world." I hear you, man. And that'll usually shut them up or be like, yeah,
Oh,
you're right.
my God.
You're right. Heath Ledger is the best Joker. Yeah, you're right. Okay, cool. It's always fucking DC fans. Can we take that out in post? Can we take that out in post?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. There are
Hey,
all sorts.
Jeremy, you just made a lot of people horny with that Zack Snyder.
I know, right? Oh man, yes, Christopher Nolan is the auteur of our time. We get it. Come on. No, but we all have what would you call it? Like our own individual bias. Like I'm pretty good. I like to pride myself in being pretty good at being able to separate myself from my fandom. There's still a couple of things though, right? Like yesterday I posted that Kurt Cobain's guitar was auctioned off for $6 million. Not like a diehard Nirvana fan, but as a teenager, as a adolescent growing up in the suburbs in the early to mid 90s, I was a huge fan of Nirvana. So when people just outright dismiss this thing that I love, I do feel part of me that wants to defend it because I feel like it's part of who I am, you know? Lord of the Rings is another really good example of something that I hold very, very close to me. So when another person does that with Star Wars, when another person does that with DC movies, Marvel movies, whatever the thing is, I'm not trying to come over and pee in your pool. You know what I mean? So right. I'll meet you where you're at. And if you love Static Shock, then I'll try to look for the things that I like about the character. Now, because you and I are familiar and we're friends, I might bust your balls about things that I don't necessarily like about him. But as far as just like random people on the internet, you can't really, I don't think you can usually get through to somebody that the thing that they like, they shouldn't like. Like, again, back to the Nirvana thing. Like this went back and forth, and then eventually I just got exhausted. I'm like, why do I feel like I have to defend my taste against what somebody else's taste is? I know I'm about to sound like John Campea, but like film, music, art, there are a few objective truths, but for the most part, it's completely subjective. Like I may be looking for the Starbucks cup in the last season of Game of Thrones, but somebody else, they may not have noticed that cup in the 8th season of Game of Thrones and think it's the greatest series of television ever made. Is it right? Is it true? I mean, obviously it is to them. If they say it's the greatest, then it's the greatest. I can't tell them that it's not the greatest, but I do feel like, and especially in our space, we should be able to appraise things on their strengths and their weaknesses. Like Lord of the Rings, let's just use that for an example. I really like the trilogy. I like the theatrical run. I like the extended edition. I think that the theatrical editions probably had better pacing for general audiences. I think most people don't care about all the extended Tolkien lore, but for a fan, you would probably like a lot of that supplemental material. So I guess my biggest takeaway is don't try to deal with toxic fans. Like, I mean, engage if you want to engage, but know that at the end of the day, you can't win and argue about opinions. You know what I mean? That's just it. Like, I'm not going to walk away liking the thing that I like less. And you're not going to walk away with a greater appreciation because I tried to, and maybe y'all would, but most people wouldn't. So yeah, my kind of takeaway is don't necessarily try to bring people over to your side. Meet them where they're at. And I think that you'll have much more productive conversations that way.
Definitely. Ian, what about you? What about toxic fanboys? How do you get them to understand that some of the things that they like potentially could have flaw? Like it's not as perfect as they hold it up to be.
All right. I'm going to tell you this story about this guy named Jeremy Branch.
God.
Did a collaboration in the early days when I first met him. And he started asking me these Lord of the Rings questions and these Game of Thrones questions. And he just went on and on about this and that and that. And I was just like, I'm going to be real with you, man. I don't like this Dungeons and Dragons shit. It's not for me. And he cried. He cried. He yelled at me. He called me Nate. He talked about my mother. You know, he took it very, very personal. And I was like, dude, I'm just not into it. I'm just kidding, you know. But I know that's his shit.
It's partially a true story. Yeah.
It's based on a true story, but no, that's his shit, you know. And I've never, as much as I gave my opinion of how that's not my lane. I clown at his age more than his love for Lord of the Rings. I don't care. That's what he likes.
To be real honest, I would way rather him clown on me about Lord of the Rings, but
not going anywhere anytime soon. So, that being said, too, man, when we're dealing with fanboys and we're dealing with things that we love, we got to be self-aware before we can even talk about other people. And I think Alex said it perfectly. Listen, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars, love them to death. Probably the most toxic fan base of all time.
Most definitely.
Don't even. I would suggest don't even engage with these people because some of them just got nothing else to do. But you got to be self-aware. The script, it should never work on paper. It's a bunch of freaking monks that move things with their mind, and they have a flashlight. The thing is stupid, but we love it because it's great script writing. It's great character development. So we got to be self-aware. Like, okay, this is not Shakespeare. This is fucking Star Wars. Yeah. And I love the MCU. I used to have a friend. Every time I talk about the new MCU movie, he'd shit on it. He'd just say, "Oh, this is stupid. It's so silly. It's dumb." And then when I say something like, "Hey, what about this Martha scene? It doesn't make any damn sense." He's like, "You don't know movies. Fuck you." I'm like, oh, we can't have this conversation. If I'm going to be self-aware, you got to be self-aware. Yeah. And at the end of the day, this is a movie. I can be except Dragon Ball Z. That's a perfect series. There's nothing illogical about that. Dragon Ball Z is perfect. I'm just kidding.
A bunch of white guys flying around with the yellow hair. Yeah, that's very logical.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm a fanboy of that. So honestly, that's my take. We got to be self-aware before we can eat. If you can dish it, you got to be able to take it. Yeah. That's all I got to say about that. And I'm very self-aware of all of my favorite franchises. I know that they got flaws. I know that they're not perfect. But you know what? I'm okay with that because it's not going to stop my love for it. And that's one thing we got to deal with. And you're not going to hang out with Goku after we have this conversation because he's not real. We're not. So, at the end of the day, if you don't know these people personal, I wouldn't even engage because sometimes they just want to arise out of you. And I understand some things are near and dear to your heart. They might take you back to your first girlfriend, or they might remind you of your father, or something when you went to the movies. I get it. So some people might take that personally if you don't like what they like. But like I said, just be more self-aware of your flaws or your favorite things before you talk about somebody else's. And I think everybody on this panel is good about that. Alex made a great example about his love for Static Shock. But he knows the flaws about it. He's like, dude, just throw water on the guy. Obviously he's not Black Panther, but he loves it. That's his passion. Respect people's love and passion, man. Don't call anybody dumb for liking something. Right. It is what it is.
Right. And I agree with what he said. Don't when you're talking, it's prime example. And this is just an example. I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but in the videos I've done about Power Rangers, I will never say to anyone who loves Power Rangers, "You're an idiot because you like Power Rangers." I'd never say that. If you like Power Rangers, that's great. I like the Ninja Turtles. They're talking. It's ridiculous. They're talking turtles. I'm not going to get offended if you say to me, "Oh, the turtles are stupid." Okay, yeah, they're talking. Yeah, they're stupid. They're talking animals. But what do you guys think about this particular topic? Just jump into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.